Okay, so welcome back, everyone. It's been a short break, but hopefully you're still awake, still excited, and still using this platform and learning and discovering and starting to connect with others. I know in my case, I am, and I'm starting to really like this platform more and more. So we've got our next panel now. This is a panel dedicated to digitalization. So this is one of the three mega trends that we're seeing really disrupting the industry. You know, natural refrigerants is one, digitalization is the second one, and cooling as a service, or new business models that allow for these new tech to come in at a lower price, are all these kind of mega trends that are making life a little bit more complicated for our industry, but also creating lots of opportunities. So today we're going to talk about digitalization. We've got three speakers. We've got 1 hour. What we'll do is each presenter will give his presentation, and then please submit some questions down on the bottom right of your window. And then if there are any relevant questions to the speaker, then we'll field those questions straight away so as to have that interaction. And then we'll have a general Q&A at the end of the session. And also, as a reminder, there's a live poll. Let me just check how many people have actually voted on that right now. Can anyone tell me?
Only 3 votes so far.
Only 3 votes, so please vote. And then hopefully we'll be able to use that as data and share that with you, with participants later on. Okay, so first off, we have Adi Vyas. So he was already on the panel previously. He's the VP of Energy and Digital Services for Neelands Group, very important company in the US. So I think I don't really need to reintroduce him, but he's an expert in this field and he's got a lot to share. So over to you, Adi.
Well, thank you, Mark, for the kind words. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for the kind words. I don't think I'm an expert by a long shot. I do surround myself with a whole bunch of experts, and that's what makes my life easier and my job glamorous. Yeah. No, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here at this event. It's a new world we live in, and it's
what a digital world, right?
Yeah, digital world, right? And so it's funny, funny how we're talking about that too. Let me see. I need to share my screen first. Give me 1 second. Can you see my screen now?
Nope.
Okay. No?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, now we can.
Okay. Okay, so I'm part of Neelands Group, and I in the past presentation I just talked a little bit more about our company. I'll try to kind of skip most of it. But those of you who are joining in for the first time, we are a family-owned company, 60 years in business. Started off as a refrigeration company, but no longer is that the case, right? So we are fast moving into HVAC control systems, software monitoring, optimization, energy management, you name it. But we pride ourselves in providing very reliable service to our customers, and as a one-stop solution, a turnkey EPC project partner, not just for your construction projects, but in terms of service and in terms of monitoring as well. So the 5 key areas where Neelands does business is refrigeration, HVAC. We have 24/7 service and maintenance crew. We have about 100 trucks on the road at all times. We do a lot of energy projects, try to save you as much money as we can. And of course, everything with a slant of sustainability. I say that because, a lot of people kind of want to do the right thing, but then they shy away because of maybe cost implications. And what we try to do is create designs that are not only sustainable but profitable. We'll talk more about it shortly. So we have a product, and I apologize if it's sounding like I'm trying to promote a product. I'm not. It's just it's a product that we have, which we call Calder. I don't know what the origin of the name is. It means something in German, I think. But it's a real-time performance analytics tool, right? And as we enter into this era of data, most people don't realize this, but in today's day and world, we collect as humans, as one entity, we collect more data in one day. In one day, we collect more data than we have in the entire history of mankind. Like that's how much more data is being collected, in this year, right? Now, here's the funny thing: most of this data in the first 80% of the data in the first 40 minutes becomes useless. Like there's so much data, and then within the first 40 minutes, it's just useless, right? So the key is what do you do with this data? And that's where the digitalization of information comes into place. And a lot of times you guys have heard, everybody has heard the word big data. It seems to be like a buzzword, right? And for the longest, I was thinking like, what is big data? Actually, it's nothing. Big data is just a whole bunch of data. That's big data. And that's what we talk about when we say big data. So what does Neelands do? So when we first started doing refrigeration and controls and service, we said, well, there's something missing from this entire equation, and what's missing is we need to be able to manage all this information coming in. So of course we work with all the standard suppliers that most of you work with, Microthermo, Danfoss, Emerson, right? But not every store is the same, and so we created the system, homegrown system, a couple of years ago, which does your alarm management, remote access, tracking the performance. And I'll just talk a little bit more about each one of these. So when you look at a CAM, which is a critical alarm monitoring, right? We try to simplify and say, well, can we make it a simple dashboard? Because remember, our customers are not software experts. Our customers are people who want to sell meat, who want to sell vegetables, who want to sell fruit. And so creating a very simple dashboard where red is bad, green is good, right? Like something of that sort is where critical alarm monitoring comes in. And so we offer that, and there are other people who offer that too, where you're just monitoring the critical alarms and notifying the appropriate staff. RAM is remote access management. So most people don't have one store. In the previous session, I talked about Longo's, which has about 37 store, and they're the largest independent in Ontario. But going on to Sobeys or Loblaws or some other companies, they have over 100, over 200 stores, and so it's very important to be able to remotely access different stores and manage your critical parameters. Um, and then moving on to that, ultimately it's all about your refrigeration systems, right? So what kind of power consumption is happening, how are the racks behaving, right? Is the compressor on, is it off? But kind of providing like a whole IoT dashboard, Internet of Things, right? So connect everything and everything that can talk to each other, and provide like a one-stop shop for your monitoring systems. And last but not the least, have a team of people. A lot of people can, collect data. I don't think you need refrigeration expertise in that regard. But what Neelands does differently is we would monitor, and then we want to make sure that somebody's looking at it. Think of it as a home alarm system, right? So a lot of people install like a home alarm system at house, but if there's a theft or a burglary or whatever happens, if nobody is monitoring on the other side, what you're relying on is somebody actually watching that signal or watching that alarm. And so we offer this monitoring too, right? So that people can avail that, and an expert team of technicians can actually resolve the issue. But we're not here to talk about what we do. I think a lot of people do this. I want to talk about a specific case study, like how digitalization changes the world that we live in, is as it regards to refrigeration. Uh, one of the biggest costs for most grocery stores is their energy cost, right, and maintenance cost. Whether you have some kind of a maintenance program, hopefully that reduces cost, or you have a time and material kind of contract, or you're just calling people as things break down. But the reason why this is important is because there's a product shrink. If something bad happens, and I think in the previous presentation we talked about propane-based systems too, which are micro distributed right at the machine. Great systems, very easy to service, great concept. I think the biggest issue is if it breaks, now you have a person going into the store where the people are shopping. But more importantly, if a compressor breaks down, well, your product is at risk. Whereas with the standard system, your product, because there's two racks with multiple compressor, that's not the case. But anyways, product shrink is a big thing for customers, and so is the energy and maintenance cost. So we started looking at refrigeration consumption, and we said, well, started monitoring, which system is performing in what way, where is the consumption happening, and we were able to identify, about 700,000 in this particular case kilowatt hours of savings. Now, mind you, this is atypical, so like this is not standard. Like the older the store or the older the equipment, easier it is to find savings. But this is where you go in, you deploy the software, and using the information that comes in, you're able to say, well, this equipment is not running properly, or the set points are not properly, or maybe you need to, add a VFD or what have you. But then we said, well, let's take it a step further, right? Because we cannot be there every time. A lot of people have their own techs, and how can we use the information that we have? Now, mind you, there's two pieces of information. One is your refrigeration knowledge, and second is the data you're collecting. So I like this little screenshot a lot. This is for a customer which has a lot of different stores across North America, and so this is and I do not have a refrigeration background, by the way. I'm an energy guy, and I'm learning refrigeration as we go along. But something that the rack beer discharge pressure set point is too high. Well, a lot of systems can do this, but using our expertise in the field, what we want to do is say, well, what does this mean? What does this mean to the end customer? To the manager, store manager, right? So we want to say, no, this translates into 2,000 kilowatt hours of extra energy consumption, which at 10 cents a kilowatt hour in this particular case is about $283, right, or 11 cents. And so you're trying to say, well, what this impact is. Now let's go here, the rack C high defrost differential. So yes, there's data that's showing this alarm, and I think the key is how you manage this data. Nobody wants to get this constant notification that something is off, but trying to manage this data and trying to quantify it in terms of what the savings could be. Now, if I was a store manager and I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, well, I better get somebody on rack A ASAP, and rack C, maybe it's not the end of the world for now, right? It helps them prioritize too. But also, I think, and those of you who are in the contractor section, you would know that it's very hard to find the right text. And so, how can we use the data to then empower the guys to go? Now you don't need a specialized tech. You can say, well, this is what you need to do. So taking the step further in terms of what you need to do is how we think that digitalization can actually change the layout of. I mean, don't get me wrong, you'll always need a specialized text, but this is how you can change the way that we use data. And of course, everything needs to be collected in a database, and you want ticket systems and tracking. And these are just examples. Sometimes even, and this is a very silly example, but I want to kind of point out, like, even something as simple as the resolution was the door was open, right? And so you identified that the tech went in there, or maybe it was something more complex, but trying to create, like, using the information to have a repository of how what happened with this particular issue or with this particular store. And then you can compare your store from one to the next as well. You look at the alarms for a particular store. In this is again not to say that we have our software all over North America, but think of it as a global chain, right? So now you can just look at a snapshot and you can say, okay, this is how this particular store is performing against the next. I want to look at this store in Colorado. This is the image, but you can just click on it, then you go into it. And I think this is how it's changing, right? And it'll change more and more, where you'll see centralized, not only dispatch, but centralized tech team, who is, I would say, the knowledge power or the brain trust, and then guiding, people to help troubleshoot and fix issues. And just to keep it short, I don't want to, go over time. Last presentation, I think I just went a little bit over time, so I want to try to keep it short. We have a whole range of customers. Longos is a very important customer, but we also have other customers. And we are not only in the grocery store space, but even outside of the grocery store space, where whether it's buildings or malls or retirement homes, digitalization has a much better, bigger impact than just the grocery stores, right? And of course, we have locations in US and Canada to help you service. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you can support in any way. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Adi. We got some questions, but I have one for you. You talked about your customers. You don't just do food retailers. You also do commercial buildings, big skyscrapers, I see.
That is correct.
Yeah. So how are those customers seeing energy and how to manage that? And the air conditioning side of things, how do they see that? Is that even more important for them than, say, for the food retailers?
So it kind of depends, right? When you talk about high-rise customers, I mean, there's generally two kinds of buildings, I would say, right? One is a commercial, like the office building sort of setup. Quite frankly, it's a very small amount of operational cost for most of these, and they're not the ones that are motivated by big, savings, although they're motivated by the CSR perspective. Then there's the government subsidized kind of low income kind of building, where a lot of this actually happens through taxes, and then they just want to keep doing projects. And then there's the other sector, which is, I would say, the condo building, where like, let's say all of us are living in a condo, and we are the condo board, right? I think that's where you see people are very, very motivated about it's a 5-year payback, 7-year payback. They're very open to saying, well, how can we make a dent in energy saving? And they're the ones who are kind of pushing us to say, well, can you collect this data? Can you give us this indication and sort of that stuff? But yes, you're right. It's a much bigger, buildings. People don't realize this, but from a GHG footprint perspective, transportation is a big one, 30 to 40%. But I think buildings kind of take the cake here, right? They're about 40% of all emissions come from buildings.
Yep. Yeah, and the cooling needs are a huge part of that, right? So
most of the building loads, actually, most of the high rises are actually a cooling load, like even in this part of the world, right? Like it's more of a cooling load than a heating load.
And it's only going to get worse if the world gets warmer, right?
True.
So yeah, okay. So we have a couple of questions. We do have time for the others, and they will get their time to present. Maybe not Tristam, but we'll. That was a joke, by the way, Tristam. It works. Even on the internet, the jokes work. Amazing.
Exactly. I got you. I was muted. I was laughing in the background.
All right. Okay. So question from Gregory. Where is the case study in Brentwood, Tennessee? That's easy to answer.
Well, yeah. So this is for a grocery store chain. It's Costco, actually. Costco's one of our bigger customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some useful market intelligence there. Then
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the reason for the question was, but yes. Yeah.
Okay. Gregory can maybe comment on that in the chat session. And then there was another question from Richard. One main reason why equipment malfunctions with compressor breakdown is the failure to do frequent condenser coil cleaning, according to a number of experts. I guess that's a comment, but maybe you want to.
Well, so that is true, and I think what we always tell people is, and our customers is, we want to be your partner, not only on day one when we are doing the project, but all throughout. In fact, yes, we want to sell you the monitoring package, but really what I want to do is you shouldn't even be bothered by monitoring unless you want to put some fancy report for your executive presentation or something. But let us use our tools and the data to make sure that we are doing the coil cleaning or the PMs in a more predictive and preventative manner, right? I don't know how much time do I have. I would like to maybe give one example if it's I have 2 minutes.
You got about a minute.
Okay, so think about this. Are you trying to maintain pressure, right? And there's a pressure control valve, right? So if you're just monitoring the pressure, you don't know, you know what the pressure is, so you might be happy, but you don't know if the PCV in the background is doing this to maintain the pressure, or it's just going, I don't know if you can see my hand, but it's going like crazy to maintain the pressure. If this is the case, this particular component is going to fail, and it's a problem. And so, if we are doing equipment diagnostics, right, then you're able to do more predictive stuff that, no, this is going to fail, and this is what you need to do, and not just monitor like the temperature or pressure, like the lagging indicator, right? But go at equipment level. So for sure, it makes all the difference in the world.
Great, thank you for that. All right, so now we're gonna hand over to Tristam Coffin. So Tristam is the president of Livingston Consulting for the US entity. You joined the North American entity, was it earlier this year, Tristam?
It was, yes.
Yeah. And previously, Tristam is familiar, is well known within the atmosphere community because he's spoken a number of times in a previous life or previous form, or I can't find my words right now. I'm tired. I don't know why. But he, as a director of sustainability and facilities at Whole Foods. Okay, so he was one of the end users on multiple panels in the past. So he's got a lot of knowledge there as well. So he's got an interesting presentation. So over to you, Tristam.
Great, thank you, Mark. So I will dive right in. Pleasure to be here. So most of you probably do know me from my Whole Foods Market days. Excited to have joined Livingstone as the president, not just in the US, but for the whole of the organization, which is about a 25-person team in the UK and here in the US. We're certainly new to the US. There's only 3 of us here today, but really we're operating across 3 or 4 verticals, some of which you can see here. And the idea is that we're really helping pioneer sustainable change in the built environment. So not just specific to grocery retail and refrigeration, but really pushing the envelope and starting to work towards the idea of what Dan was talking about earlier, that nexus between the supply side and the demand side. So, pushing towards reaching the goal of zero, which is critical. And we can't forget about refrigeration and cooling in that equation. It's probably one of the most important components if we are to actually meet zero. So really appreciate what Dan had to say earlier, and I'll touch upon a bit of that today. To further introduce Livingstone, you can see we're, again, both operating in the UK and the US. Some of our achievements across our customer portfolio to date are located there on that slide. I'm not going to go through each of them, but really the idea behind Livingstone is not to just be consultants, really be focused on pragmatic execution and delivery across a number of verticals. And the idea is to take it from concept to commissioning. And again, we're not a 300 or 500 or 1,000 person team. We're 25 people. So we're really focused on partnership, integrated design approach, integrated strategy, implementation, and operations, and creating that feedback loop that is critical to actually getting work done. So to dive into the digitalization piece, I really wanted to try to break it down in the most simple form possible, and really focus on the fact that from my perspective, or Livingstone's perspective, digitalization is really the recipe and the results are the same. And it's critical to understand that connectivity, enterprise management, and standardization are both the recipe and the results. And what I mean by that is, first need to connect our buildings in order to manage the data, as Adi was saying, which a lot of us have started to do, but unfortunately we've done it in somewhat of a disparate manner with a number of different platforms, devices, monitoring, et cetera, that are not necessarily connected. So that connectivity piece is critical. Enterprise management, so not just connecting assets within a specific facility or building, but really starting to look at it from an enterprise platform perspective. Having that single pane of glass to see all of your building assets, but all of the assets within those buildings. And then standardization, which I think is probably one of the pieces that we're missing the opportunity the most at this point in time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. And then what's the result of both of these, the recipe and the results? Well, it's more digitalization and better results, quite honestly. So, and it's kind of a rinse and repeat, continue to build off the foundation and grow the idea of digitalization into a more optimized platform or agenda, I guess you would say. So that being said, the opportunities in digitalization. First is connect. So as I was mentioning before, it's digitalization to connect disparate assets. Like Addy was saying, Livingstone has a behind the scenes tool that we launched here recently called Asset Studio. And there's a number of different tools out there. We're not saying that Asset Studio is the only one. There's plenty out there, and I would encourage everyone to explore those options, because it really is critical that we start to tie those disparate assets together so that we get better visibility and can start to manage the data, as Addy was referring to during his presentation also. From there, then we automate. So digitalization to automate service, which I think is critical. Oftentimes in the refrigeration space, we use the example of the automotive industry and where they've taken service. We're not at a point today where you can walk into any facility, plug in a computer, and run diagnostics on everything that's going on either within your refrigeration system or, more importantly, the greater facets of the entire facility, which is really going to be critical to, again, managing to that idea of zero carbon that we were talking about earlier. But most importantly, really being able to optimize the service that our technicians, as we all know, and I think some folks were talking about it earlier in other panels, the fact that the service technicians need as much training and help as they can get. So if we can start to digitalize and automate a lot of that service, we're only going to be giving them a hand up to help deliver what they do best. Next bit is predict. So digitalization for fault detection, predictive maintenance, and continuous commissioning, all these being buzzwords that most of us have heard before. But I think that prediction piece is really critical. If we can get out ahead of failures, if we can optimize because we predict, which I'll get to in just a moment, this is really going to continue to further the industry. And that this really rides on the back of that digitalization model. The next piece being the optimize. So digitalization for resource optimization, product integrity, food safety, and product mapping. So this is really where you start to pull together all the opportunities in the world of digitalization. So it's not just from a service or installation or management perspective at the actual resource or asset, specifically at the asset being the refrigeration rack, but you start to tie together the other critical components such as product integrity, food safety, and even start to get into the idea of how do we start pulling together consumer-based digitalization, such as product mapping and so forth, to make the shopping experience more accessible, more efficient, and more productive. So from our perspective, it's really about, again, tying together the disparate assets. And those disparate assets, I think, take form in a number of different ways. But these are kind of three of the overlap opportunities. And those overlap opportunities are controls, platforms, integration. So most grocery or food retail or buildings have some sort of EMS, BMS controls in place today. Some may need to be upgraded, but generally speaking, there is some sort of platform. Most have also started to add condition monitoring, and many have also started to add energy monitoring. But again, these are all disparate assets, so it's important that we start to tie them together. So in that nexus, that's when we really start to hit energy insights, drift and fault detection, proactive uptime focus, continuous commissioning, FM, so facilities maintenance, and planned preventative maintenance validation and assurance, and predictive maintenance. And again, through that single pane of glass with a product like Asset Studio or any of the others that exist out there. And again, we're not saying that Asset Studio is the only one, nor are we trying to sell a product here. I think it's important just to recognize that as we begin to tie the systems together, we really have an opportunity to optimize how our buildings and the racks and HVAC systems, lighting systems, and other assets within those buildings can function at a premium level. So what are some of the advantages and ways that we can take advantage of these systems? So high reactive spend. So when we start to digitalize, excuse me, we moved into improved triage. We have better KPI measurement, continuous improvement, technical sign off for extra work beyond the contracted work. Again, planned preventative maintenance monitoring. We also start to really focus in on not just spending capital for the sake of spending capital, but look at our aging asset and investment fleet. And I will say this, having worked for end user, this is something end users tend to overlook, I would say. I think we have an opportunity to do a much better job at asset management as a whole, and with digitalization and those insights that we gain through looking through a single pane of glass, we really start to recognize the opportunities for forward capital planning, technical due diligence, the refurbishment of certain assets, the replacement of others, where we can potentially reclaim parts of specific assets and really start to better manage our overall fleets. Again, whether that's a building fleet or whether that's assets within an individual building. And then from there, we get to really build off of all those lessons and start to create a more robust specification. So we can review, renew, repeat, or as we like to say, rinse and repeat once we start to standardize, create a better R&D pipeline. So start to look forward, define what good looks like, start to audit that for quality. And then I think the biggest piece is a standardization, and all of this across the board. You'll hear me talk about standardization as a critical component, which, as you probably all know, we're not at that point. We're probably far from that point in the refrigeration space, but I think we have a real opportunity, especially as we move towards naturals, to start to optimize standardization and really start to take lessons learned from other industries. So say some of the additional wider reaching or longer term benefits from ongoing digitalization, some of which I've mentioned already, but I'll touch upon these again. So optioneering. So what does optioneering mean? It means proactive continuous improvement with a sound baseline. But optioneering is really about looking at the variables prescribed by the end user or the stakeholders and starting to look at what are the best options to move the industry forward, start to drive efficiency, and again, head towards that idea of zero, whether it be zero carbon, zero energy, or the like. And again, it's about balancing first cost, total cost of ownership, carbon impact, energy efficiency, resource impact, all of these things tied together, and start to model that. And again, the more data we have and the better management of that data is really critical. What good looks like, guides. So when we start to have more data and we manage that data in a more efficient manner, we can start to implement better design, installation, facility management, handover for a better life cycle of care. And then, as I mentioned before, you can start to rinse and repeat that. The robust standardized specifications. Again, you hear me say standardization on a number of occasions, but if we don't get to a point where we start to standardize, we're not going to see a wider adoption of all the technologies, including naturals, that we want to see, in large part because we're never going to hit the economies of scale that are critically important to us to not only see naturals move forward, but really hit the targets that we've all been talking about earlier today, and that's really focused around zero carbon. Digitalization for audit process and KPI monitoring. So again, just improving overall operations, which really at the end of the day is, Addie also alluded to, grocery stores just want to sell groceries. They want to sell broccoli, right? And buildings, regardless of what their functionality is, the people that occupy them just want them to serve their purpose. So how can we make sure that buildings operate better? We have a real opportunity to do that with better data management and the digitalization and controls, monitoring, and again, all of the devices that we really just need to tie together. Data for good. Including visualization, infographics, and data storytelling. I don't want to overlook the fact that there's a real opportunity to use data to tell stories. But again, that data has to be distilled. And I think the common mistake that a lot of folks are making these days is that everyone talks about SaaS-based programs, IoT, et cetera, but you need a human element to make all of those systems work. And you need to be able to distill all that data. It's not to say that AI and machine learning can't help that process along, and that will continue to get, those systems will continue to get far more advanced, but you do need the human interaction to really deliver that. And that is in part what is behind Asset Studio and what Livingstone's doing. And we're excited to continue to offer that to the wider industry. I'll leave you with this, just a few insights that I would add on digitalization. The grocery industry is slow to adopt. And all of us in this virtual crowd have a real opportunity to, I think, push forward with digitalization. But think about it this way. Digital shelf tags, which seem like something that should be pretty universal, have been very slow to adopt, right? You could in real time, change sales, change pricing if you need to change pricing. However, I would say, it's a 50-50 shot of whether you walk into a grocery store anywhere in North America and see a digital shelf tag. Natural refrigerant technologies will really demand digitalization. You've probably heard me say this before, but as a result of electronic controls and natural refrigerants really being the advanced technologies in the refrigeration space, they're really going to demand digitalization, which will hopefully drive us towards that standardization piece I've mentioned on a number of occasions. Big data, I think this is the common theme. Using it is the hardest part. We need to start using it to our advantage, and we really need to start working together to do that. We need to make sure that the control platforms, monitoring platforms, et cetera, that are out there are open source, so that we can start to flow data between these disparate assets, start to work together to tie them together. And again, make sure that we don't forget that the human element in all these software platforms and hardwares, technologies that are out there isn't lost. Digitalization is not the sole solution, as I was just getting at. It requires the human strategy, implementation, and oversight. And I guess the other piece that is most interesting to me, as I mentioned on the earlier slide, is how will the back of house and front of house opportunities in digitalization start to merge? In other words, will there be an interaction between the performance of the building and the systems within that building, i.e. the refrigeration system, and how the consumer interacts with them? So will there continue to be an interest? And I think you're seeing a growing interest from the larger consumer base in the data that is flowing through any given facility and building, and I think that's more true today than it's ever been, in a large part because of COVID and people wanting to understand the building that they're occupying or the building that they're shopping in, so that they know I would say health of the building, but also how they can better interact with the building to again optimize their time in that space. So I will leave you with those thoughts, and I'm sure there's some questions, but appreciate being here today. I wish we were all together in person, but hope everyone's staying safe. And thanks again to the ATMO team for having me.
Thank you, Tristam, for an excellent presentation. Couple of questions. One comment. Presentations will be available. Don't worry, you'll get an email with all the presentations, so you can download those as well as view the videos. That was one of the comments. Don't forget to vote on the poll for this session. So far, we've had 29 votes, so it's still not good enough. So please take a couple of seconds to do that. Now, specifically to Tristam, you talked about the human element. I mean, and Adi mentioned this, is like so much data. Most of it's useless, actually. It takes us so much time to process and understand that data. You also need a human to be able to interpret it properly. Those things aren't, as soon as you involve a human, it's not as easy. It's not that easy to scale up and bring that platform to multiple users, or is it? How can you then scale this up to really capture the whole market with a said platform if you have by default to use a human?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think you have to scale up with the technology. There's no question there. I think the challenge, and I'll use an anecdote from my previous life, as you were saying. So, I spent probably the last 5 or 6 years trying to find a technology platform that could be that single pane of glass, right? However, most of the folks that we worked with there's 1,000 great solutions out there. Maybe not 1,000, but there's plenty of great solutions out there. However, most of them only deliver the technology or the software. And what they're not coming with is the human element, because the technology is only going to get it so far. If you don't have someone that can help further distill the data for the building operator or end user or the like, then you're missing it, because it's just going to be another dashboard that you have to log into to try to decipher what the technology is telling you. And if that's all that you offer the owner operators, I mean, to Adi's point earlier, people are trying to sell groceries, right? If we're talking about the supermarket retail space, anyone else, is trying to manage an office space or whatever the case may be. And most of these end users don't have the resources in-house to take the data that the technologies can distill and turn it into actionable metrics and or actionable next steps. And I think that's where the human element is critically important. And you need the technical resources to do that. And
that's not an easy thing to deliver, right? From a cost.
It's not an easy thing to deliver. I think there is, but you need to have the resources that can start to bridge the gaps between the technology and, say, for instance, the service providers, right? So, if you have a platform that's pushing out alerts, oftentimes the service providers they're just trying to keep their heads above water. So how do you distill that down further, deliver it to the service providers, and then start to actually see actionable change in the market? And I think that's important. And eventually the machine learning and AI and all these platforms, I think will start to eliminate that human element more as they become more intelligent, and will become more efficient with it. But I think the biggest piece that we're missing today is that human resource, and making sure that that human resource is connecting the dots between the technology that is beginning to scale and the end users and owners, operators that are kind of begging for really just the action items that they need to take.
Okay. Adi, you have a quick comment before we hand over to Chris?
Yes, just real quick. Sorry, and I couldn't agree with Tristam more, but I think he hit it at the end there. I think the next step really is the machine learning and AI piece, right? So, how do we take this data? So I think we are all getting good at collecting data. We're all getting good at, trying to make meaningful reports and alarms out of this data. And then people looking at it and analyzing it. But I think the next step really, and we are working on it, like as Neelands too, but I'm sure others are too, is to take the next step and go into machine learning. We're now looking at this data. Now you're saying, well, do we need to get, as an example, so much fresh air intake? Because, right now there's nobody in the store. So I don't need to have this fresh air intake and just increase my energy consumption, as an example. It's a very simple example, but there's a lot more there. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to get that point out there.
Okay, Chris, maybe you want to comment on that before we hear your presentation, or you want to jump straight in?
Well, I do agree that the technology is evolving. AI is certainly part of it. We at RDM have some predictive maintenance algorithms, those sort of things that are meant to help with those type of issues, and that continues to evolve with every release of software that we have. So.
Okay, thank you. So Chris Pegg is Vice President of Sales for North America for RDM. RDM are a UK-based outfit originally, right?
Yes.
And been around for quite a few years. You've been in the industry yourself, 25 years. And I think from my understanding of RDM is that RDM, every time I've heard about RDM, you've always talked about how you're slightly different from others in the sense that you really push the open protocol approach. I'd like to understand a bit better what that means and how, and what are the disadvantages or advantages there, and if and open the floor up to comments as well from others. So please, start with your presentation, and then we should have enough time for questions after.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you for the introduction. I am Chris Pegg. I'm Vice President of North American Sales for RDM USA. And it's actually 28 years that I've been in the industry. I think I started about 9 years old or so, I believe, if I'm thinking back that far. So I've been around for a while, mostly on the controls end of the business. I've been with RDM USA for the past 3 years. For 20 years, RDM has been a leader in the design and manufacture of control, monitoring, and energy management solutions. We control refrigeration, HVAC, and lighting applications in a number of platforms, supermarkets, box retail, cold storage warehouses, C-stores, quick serve restaurants, and even funeral homes is another one that we have in the UK, I understand. So it's a little different market there. We've got global offices and a global distribution network, and we're trusted by leading brands around the world. But from the outset, RDM Solutions have really been innovated and broken down barriers. We've had a couple of pretty exciting industry firsts. We were the first controls installation at the IP level, or utilizing IP communications down to the device level, rather. And we also put the first transcritical solution in New Zealand in 2014. Today, I want to discuss how utilization of facility management systems to digitalize the supermarkets can improve operational efficiency and profitability. So when we talk about what is digitalization, based on projections, millennials are going to purchase the majority of groceries in the next decade. Supermarket retailers are increasing sales and profits with technologies that attract and engage a key demographic of millennials. We're all familiar with things like online shopping, curbside pickup. Those are some very notable trends in modern digital supermarkets. Another one that I read about as I was researching some of these topics is something called beacon technology, and that pushes coupon and discount alerts out to smartphones as they're actually as their GPS location is close to a supermarket. Then another interesting one I found is something called smart shelves. With smart shelves, a customer enters their shopping list, and actually when they're in the store, the app directs them to the shelf where the product on their shopping list is located. And some of the technologies can even light up the shelf as they're approaching the item that they're looking for. So these are some of the technologies on the consumer side that we're seeing. So digitalization, I'd say, is how these new digital technologies will impact people and work. On RDM side of the business, those are really kind of things that are invested as far as consumer needs go. But digital technology, for example, on our side of the business, can be used by the supermarket industry to improve operations, decrease carbon footprints, and improve profitability. Facility management systems control and reduce energy for HVAC, refrigeration, and lighting systems, as well as provide an IoT platform to not only receive digital data on the systems, but also to aid in understanding and responding to that data. So a modern facility management system should provide a few things. It should provide complete monitoring and control solution for all mechanical equipment in the supermarket. It should communicate on a truly open network protocol, avoiding past trends of trapping customers with proprietary equipment. It should provide the capability of integrating legacy systems onto a common communications platform. An FMS should also realize the full potential of the Internet of Things by collecting data on important performance indicators for the refrigeration, HVAC, and lighting systems. An FMS should also help facility managers react quickly to potential issues that could negatively impact the shopper's experience. So I mentioned that RDM was, we put our first IP-based system in 2004. And any modern facility management system should communicate using the IP protocol or Internet protocol. And IP is the network communication protocol that's utilized to send data from one device to another across an intranet or intranet. In an IP configuration, each device on the network has an IP address that identifies it from all other devices on the network. And IP communications is the standard for global communications. It's interesting that on the facility network, there's often more microprocessor controlled devices than there are on the point of sale side of the network. So IP networking at the device level is the protocol that's best suited for a digital supermarket. And there's a number of reasons why that's the case. IP networking is fast. Due to greater bandwidth network transmission speeds, we can actually measure the speed of the data going across the facility management network in milliseconds using IP as the network standard. IP is reliable. IP networks do not rely on legacy token ring communications to pass data. Networking troubleshooting is easier on an IP network. There's a lot of third-party devices, such as patch cables and troubleshooting tools, software products, and that sort of thing that aid with troubleshooting. Third-party technologies such as Wi-Fi, IP over mains, fiber optics, those are all options that can be easily added to an IP network to provide greater flexibility as we're looking as we're going into different size buildings and to meet network demands. Users can easily connect to other IP devices from a laptop or a PC. There's no need for separate hardware in this type of a network configuration. IP networks are less expensive to install due to reduced cable and installation costs. IP networks are future-proof. Engineers can utilize the latest networking technologies that becomes available. RDM, again, our system's operated on IP networks since day one. We completed the first retail controls installation in the world in 2004 using the IP networking protocol. Mark, to your earlier point, truly open protocols are also an essential piece and something that RDM has pushed quite extensively. The facility management system should integrate seamlessly with third-party open protocol devices. For example, RDM's data manager can communicate simultaneously with mechanical equipment that speaks the following network protocol languages.
So does that mean, for example, in your case, you can work with your competitors' controls?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
so we can speak not only to third-party proprietary controllers, but we can speak to third-party equipment that speaks BACnet, Modbus, Echelon, DALI is a lighting protocol, CAN bus. So we've got several languages that we're able to speak simultaneously to those type of devices.
Okay.
And then we can integrate and display those devices locally on the data manager or remotely via web browser with the need for expensive or proprietary software. So essentially our data manager is a web communication device that's pushing all of this data that we're collecting locally in the store up to a web page, and we're accessing that as long as we're on the same network with the data manager via a web browser. So taking all that third-party information along with the RDM devices and pushing it up to that network. The language that RDM speaks out of the top of each of our controllers and out of our data managers, XML. XML is a web protocol. If we think about devices that we're familiar with, everyone has a smartphone, and each of your smartphones speaks XML. So there's really no way to get more open than a web protocol. That means that third-party software systems, for example, Microsoft has a cloud-based database program called Azure. An Azure database can actually, using what we call web services, interrogate a data manager and pull data right out of our data manager, or actually even down to the control level if we want to do that, back into the cloud-based database without any kind of software whatsoever, just using what we call web services commands.
Question.
Yes.
Fits well. You talked about XML. Are you worried about security of data?
Not at all. So there's a couple things. First of all, typically a data manager or any of our devices aren't sitting on the open internet. So you would have the customer's VPN security in place, and also the data manager has security protocols in place. So it has a hardware firewall built into our device, which totally separates the point of sale side of the network from the facility management side of the network. Each of our devices also has a unique password out of the box that has to be changed by the user. And we're utilizing a lot of standard IT network protocol security applications as well.
Okay.
Within the data platform.
All right.
It's probably actually one of the most secure devices in the industry.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Got about another 5-6 minutes, so I hope you've got enough time.
Perfect. All right, no problem. So as we talk about capturing data, supermarkets, mechanical equipment potentially has thousands of data points. As I was researching this, a typical CO2 or natural refrigerant system has over 17,000 data points, including 8,000 data points that are continuously changing.
Wow.
So obviously managing these data points and providing intuitive, intelligent mechanism for evaluating the data is key. RDM's data manager has the ability to store changes to equipment input and output points, such as temperatures, pressures, statuses, change of states every 15 seconds. This equates to almost 2 million recordings per hour that we're storing on the data manager's hard drive, potentially.
And as Adi said, that probably most of that is useless, right? Unless you've got a human to interpret.
So not only do we store that data, we also have intuitive mechanisms for pulling the data in. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Both
I don't want to be too difficult on you, Chris. I'm just trying to link
both locally on the data manager and in our cloud application as well. So accessing data, and this will probably talk a little to your question. So a modern facility management system should provide easy, intuitive access to site or enterprise data. Most facility management systems allow some site data to be accessed locally. Again, our data is stored on the data manager's hard drive. It can be accessed locally. And in an average size supermarket, we keep about 5 years worth of mechanical data stored on that hard drive. And then we also have the ability to look at the data from an enterprise level. We've got a monitoring solution called ActiveFM. That's probably very similar to what Tristam and Addy spoke about. ActiveFM offers an IoT platform to meet food safety and quality concerns and to aggregate mechanical system and energy data for single or multiple sites. And then we can, the data that we're collecting, we also have redundant storage of that data in our cloud system as well. So a remote monitoring platform protects perishable and non-perishable goods and ensures a comfortable shopping environment for customers. It provides a smart display of data, which has been aggregated from a single site or a group of sites. And this is key. All data from the mechanical system should be quickly and easily accessible from a web platform like ActiveFM. And the dashboard is where we're actually going to aggregate that data and put it into a platform that makes sense, whether the energy manager is looking at it, food safety manager, facility manager, or maybe even a financial officer. So data is at its most valuable when it's easily accessible and in real time. Enhanced data collection achieved by digitalization of supermarket mechanical systems improves analytical capabilities. And this is an interesting slide. This is a customer actually in the UK called Pets at Home. They're an RDM customer that had an enterprise that was running far from optimal efficiency with outdated high bay and fluorescent lighting and minimal control of in-store equipment. There was a clear opportunity to modernize and make the system more sustainable. Pets at Home also has live animals in their stores, so there was a requirement for strict temperature controls. So the solution comprised of adding LED lighting and a facility management system. And the outcome was considerable reduction of energy and a notable increase in Pets at Home ability to control and monitor stores automatically. And as you can see by the results, embracing digitalization dramatically increased the profitability and increased the carbon footprint for this particular customer. Yeah, I think I have 2 more slides here, so hopefully I'm meeting the 5 minutes that was left. So as supermarkets become more complex, retailers should consider facility management systems as part of their innovation and digitalization plans. Modern systems embrace the concept of digitalization and offer many great advantages. To recap, a modern FMS should provide the following solutions. It should integrate open protocol devices into a common system. It should integrate legacy systems into a common web-based communications platform. It should aid in reducing and managing and understanding energy use in the facility. It should provide predictive maintenance routines and troubleshooting tools. It should allow for remote troubleshooting and servicing of mechanical equipment so that tasks such as firmware upgrades can be done remotely over the internet instead of with site visits. And then the facility management system should provide intelligent alarm reporting and capabilities to provide store management technicians with greater insight and possible solutions to problems in the mechanical systems. Finally, Thomas Edison once said, "There's a way to do it better, find it." Innovation is key to remaining relevant. Food retailers operate at very slim margins, and systems that help trim costs can provide advantages in an ever-changing and competitive market. Facility management systems help supermarket operators create and maintain efficient and sustainable environments for shoppers. Critical operations equipment is maintained and monitored, ensuring food quality and safety and protecting brand image. Improved operations that result from the use of facility management systems allow resources to be shifted so that supermarket operators can focus on their core business of selling groceries. And I appreciate you guys inviting me today, and I thank everybody for their time and attention.
Thank you, Chris. There's a few more questions that are on the list, and we're not going to be able to answer those questions, unfortunately, on the live discussion. But can I ask the panelists to just take the time after this session to just answer directly in the chat box? Sure. Some of the answer to the questions. I do have one, and that's the privilege of being the moderator. You mentioned a slide about capturing data. A
Yes.
typical CO2 system, I think you said 17,000 data points, of which 8,000 are continuously changing.
That's right.
If we compare that to a typical HFC system, is that more data points or less? And if so, how does that, can you build a business case by saying that digitalization and the optimization of these systems helps natural refrigerants more than, say, HFC systems, or it doesn't really matter? I'd be curious to know.
Yes, that there would be more data points in a natural refrigerant system. I don't know if it helps more or less, but obviously there's a lot of critical things that are going on, particularly in some of the high pressure systems. So from a safety and monitoring standpoint, I would say that digitalization through a facility management system is absolutely necessary in those type of systems. I wouldn't see any sort of a mechanical control system controlling a CO2 system. There's really just too much going on in that. So
yeah.
Absolutely necessary in those type of systems.
All right. Any final comments from Tristam or Addy? You can say yes or no.
All good here. Thanks again.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Tristam.
No, all good on my end. Thank you all. Pleasure to be with all of you.
Yeah, all good on my end too. Thanks for hosting this, Mark. You're a great host, and thank you for the opportunity for speaking.
All right. Thanks, guys. And I hope that the audience appreciated the panel, and you can continue the conversation by connecting with them through the platform and having one-to-one video calls. So feel free to do that over the next couple of days. All right. Thank you. It's break time. So see you after the break.